Hello, I'd like to welcome you to the webinar, Sloppy Handwriting, Tips and Techniques to Improve Common Handwriting Problems. My name is Kim Wiggins, and I am an OT. For those of you that are listening tonight, I just wanted to let you know that I have muted all of the microphones except for mine so that we don't hear any background noise. And we are recording this webinar tonight so that it can be an on-demand webinar as well. So if you're listening on demand, thank you also for attending. And I also just wanted to tell you that I am getting paid by Sensational Brain for this presentation, but I have no other financial or non-financial interest related to the content of this webinar. So, thank you again for coming and joining us on a late night. And we are using the GoToMeeting format. So if you are listening through the speakers of your computer, that's great. Sometimes that doesn't always work depending on your internet connection. So you may have to try a couple things, close out all your extra browsers. Sometimes your cell phones, if they're right next to your computer, might affect the streaming. If all else fails, you can use the telephone connection instead of the microphone and the speakers. There is a chat box down at the bottom. It has a little plus sign. Right here on this screen. It has a negative sign because once you hit plus, it changes to negative, so you can write into little messages in there. Now you can write everyone a message, or you can write me a message, but this is how we'll use this for questions or comments or anything like that. And so if we can just get that started, it's always great to see and hear from where people are listening from. So if you can write the state or the country that you're listening from and also your profession, that's also very helpful. So go ahead, start typing in some of those things into the chat section so we can see who we are with tonight. And just to let you know a little bit about myself, if you haven't been to one of my webinars before, I am a full-time occupational therapist, and I work at the Binghamton City School District in Binghamton, New York. I have roughly between 60 and 70 kids on my caseload every year, and so I definitely am getting a lot of handwriting referrals every year, but we'll talk about that in a second. I do also on the side, I present for Summit Professional Education, which is a continuing educational company, and I present a course called Pay Attention, School-Based Strategies, Apps, Visual Exercises, Primitive Reflexes, and Sensory Tools. And so that is a good course for novice OTs or experienced OTs. We get a lot of really good feedback from that. I also am fortunate enough to work with Gwen Wild through her company, Sensational Brain, and I do a variety of different webinars for her, and we have, and actually it says 1 hour each here, but the times have actually increased now. There are a bunch of different ones that are available through sensationalbrain.com, and Gwen has some really awesome ones, and there's some other professionals that present there as well. I do have several certifications. I'm certified in the listening program, mobile devices for children with disabilities, so that's why I have a bunch of iPad and technology webinars, and that's also part of my presentation. And then also I'm also certified in Handwriting Without Tears and in Zahner Blozer. They have a Zahner Blozer certification course as well, so I have been certified in those for quite a while as well. And so that kind of makes up all the different types of presentations that I've been doing. There's actually a new presentation that's starting that's all based on primitive reflexes, so you may want to check that out. It's airing live on September 1st at 8 p.m. Eastern time, and then it will be an on-demand webinar as well. On a personal level, it's always nice to see who's talking to you all night. My husband and I, we have 2-year-old twins, Kara and Joshua. We have a baby on the way. I am due in October. And then we also have our son, John, who's 15 years old. He was actually my OT kid from the age of 3. We fostered him. We became foster parents for him when he was 6, and we adopted him when he was 10, and he's 15 now. And he is a very, very good big brother. He does have a bunch of different special needs that have really affected, a lot of what we do on a daily basis. And the reason I bring him up is sometimes I have pictures of him. He likes to be my little case study throughout all my presentations. Definitely, he's been an OT candidate for most of his life. And he, as far as sloppy handwriting goes, that was one of the biggest issues that he had. Very, very low muscle tone, poor attention span, a lot of behavior issues, poor motivation. And so that, he would get through reading, but he would not write, and when he did, he had a really hard time, and that was a big concern for a lot of his teachers. So we've done a lot of different techniques with him. So I've done that from an OT perspective and a parental perspective. So I can give you some information about that as we go along as well. Okay, so if you would like to ever email me about questions or ideas that you have, you can do that at listenwrite@gmail.com. I also have something called a Google group, and this is called Listen, Write, Shine Bright at googlegroups.com. And what this is there's about 2,000 members on the Google group. It's where you can ask a question to the group and people will respond with answers. Most of us may work in a school system with 100 colleagues, but we don't really get to speak with other OTs on a regular basis or other professionals about the stuff that we're addressing. And so this is a nice way to kind of have a way of communicating with a lot of different people. And I moderate it, so every time someone sends a message, I read it first and approve it, so we just decrease on any of that spam stuff that we don't want. And I mostly accept all of them unless I notice that it's a spam issue. One of the things that you're going to notice in all of my presentations is that I use a URL shortener. So, you might have downloaded the materials for tonight, and if there's a website link that you would normally just like to click on, but you can't because it's on a paper version or whatever, you would have to then, type in that really long web address. And sometimes they're really confusing. And if you mess up a couple characters, you really don't get where you need to be. So they have things called URL shorteners. I use the Google version. There's a lot of different ones. But what you do is when you go onto type in Google URL shortener, what you would do is down here, you would copy the long web address and then press shorten URL, and it gives you a shortened version of that. So what I've done for you is if there is a long web address, I give you the long version. I also give you the short version. And then you would know where it came from, but at the same time, you would only have to type in this, okay? So that just makes your life hopefully a little bit easier for you when you are trying to look at some of the links that I give you later on. So as we're getting into the sloppy handwriting, I made this pyramid a while ago because I like to look at things visually, and it really helps me organize my thoughts and how I can teach it to other people. So in order for kids to get, decent, legible handwriting skills, what we need are all of these things underneath it before they can even get to the handwriting stage. And the main one is attention, behavior, and motivation. Now, I live with a 15-year-old that has very limited attention span, behavior, and motivation. And I can tell you that if he doesn't want to work on something or want to be better at something, he's not going to make a lot of progress with things. And so, some of the handwriting programs out there are more fun, I guess, than you would think, than others. And so, motivating them to even want to do some of those skills is going to be huge. If they don't have the attention span to sit at the table, they don't have then you look if they don't have the visual skills to pay attention to what they're doing by looking and being able to keep their visual attention there, or just basic acuity, their handwriting skills are going to suffer. Their primitive reflexes, if they are still exhibiting them and they have retained primitive reflexes. Sally Goddard is a researcher with primitive reflexes, big pioneer with primitive reflexes. A quote from her book is that handwriting skills are the biggest casualty of retained primitive reflexes because it really takes a lot out of you. And then what about posture, trunk, upper extremity stability? you don't have the endurance to be able to sit there and do those types of tasks. Even if you have everything below it, still handwriting is going to be an issue. You need to have bilateral coordination, you need to have wrist extension, you need to have the fine motor skills, and then bam, not only do you have to have all that stuff within it's not on the list, but you need to have the cognitive skills as well, and to really get that handwriting to be legible. So if you really look at everything, there are a lot of factors that lead into handwriting. Now, one of the things, it's definitely one of the biggest, I think the most popular OT referrals in a school system is poor handwriting. And so then our job as OTs is to evaluate and see what areas out of this pyramid are really affecting them so that we can address it in OT so that they can generalize those skills into their handwriting skills. And I will be the first one to say it, that if I evaluate a student and all of their areas come out within the average range, but they still have very illegible handwriting, then I do not recommend OT for them. Handwriting is definitely not something that we can just add on to IEPs and 504s. They really have to show delays in certain things. So tonight, we'll talk about different evaluations and screening tools and things like that, but take that with a grain of salt, because you can't, I've done the handwriting evaluations for years, but what I've noticed is that, all their skill areas come out in the average range, but their handwriting skills might get 0%, or, they have 20% legibility. A parent will see that and say, well, then how can you not recommend OT if they are receiving a 20%, right? And so it's just, I tend to use that information for my own personal goals and things that I want to make for that student. But putting those numbers in there, you just have to be careful about that, because it can cause some drama in those IEP meetings at times. The biggest thing is that we want kids to have automaticity. Now, do you know what? Teachers use the word automaticity all the time. In the therapy world, what would be a term that we would call automaticity? Any ideas? Motor planning, right? Motor planning is huge when it comes to handwriting. And once we have that motor plan, we have it forever. It's an automatic skill. We don't have to write, when we're writing our notes, we don't have to think about every single letter, how to spell maybe some of us have to think about how to spell, but, we don't have to think about every little aspect of handwriting. And a lot of these kids don't have that ability. They don't have the automatic skill. They don't have the motor planning skill. Now, Virginia Berninger is, just to make sure, is the audio cutting out for anyone else? It might. Okay. So some of you might just have a poor internet connection, unfortunately. If it's not cutting out for one person, then it means it's working. Okay. Thank you, everybody. Sorry. You might want to go to telephone if it is cutting out. And if there's any more issues with that, definitely email myself or Gwen at the end of the webinar, and we can figure that out. Okay, so it must be your internet connection, Diana. Sorry about that. So Virginia Berninger is a leading handwriting researcher, and we will talk about her in a little bit. But one of the things that she says is that when students are able to automatically use handwriting to record thoughts, it frees up other cognitive abilities, allowing them to produce more complex compositions. So this is what teachers are really concerned about. And, it can, for lack of better words, look annoying when you see when you have a student that has very messy handwriting, from a teacher perspective. You want them to do well. You want to be able to read their writing because they're having some thoughts. But essentially what's happening is that they want them to be able to think about what they're writing, not how to write it, And so that's essentially what the main concern is. We want kids to think and write at the same time. A lot of times they're thinking about how to write and not what they're writing, and that's where it leads into a problem. And when they can think about the content and perform legible writing at the same time, it will increase their efficiency and it will increase their automaticity, and it does also increase their they have just more confidence being able to write and not have to worry about how legible it looks. So handwriting is not something we're born with. If you look at that pyramid, all of those things really need to be intact for you to have some legible handwriting, and it takes some work, and it does need to be taught. Unfortunately, especially if you're in a state that has the core curriculum, or even if you don't have the core curriculum, there's so much to work on in a school day that handwriting has really been kind of eliminated from some of the curriculum that we're using out there. And so that's why it ends up becoming an OT referral, unfortunately. So what can we do? I've really consulted with a lot of teachers on how to make handwriting a lesson that is also part of English language arts, or, that they're doing that at the same time. Also, we might have to look to the parents to really try to help with that. I work in a very low-income school district, so a lot of our parents, they don't even come to IEP meetings, so getting them to work on handwriting at home doesn't usually happen. So I can totally understand that, but that we have to try to figure it out. Now, one of the things that has been really awesome that I probably use on a weekly basis are handwriting expectations. What happened was in 2012, January 2012, the Zahner Bloser Handwriting Company actually gathered all of the leading handwriting researchers and administrators from school districts from across the world, or across the U.S., and got them into one place, and they had a handwriting summit. They presented the most recent research about handwriting skills, how it affects their cognitive skills, brain differences that are going on when you handwrite, when you compared to when you type, that keyboard, that type of stuff. And it's a really great website. In fact, someone asked today on the Google group about that a school district is trying to eliminate cursive, which I know unfortunately cursive has been long gone in a lot of other school districts, and we're just trying to save printing. But in that particular school district, they were getting rid of cursive, and so she wanted to know some cursive research. So I directed her to this website. This website has, if you're looking for the most recent website or research, this is going to have the most updated information. Hopefully then can lead you to some other things. There's even videos on there and the research papers that are on there as well. What they did then is that they created standards for grades K through 8. And I think it might even be pre-K now that they've updated it. And so for each grade level, it tells you exactly what they should be doing for their handwriting skills. In addition to that, they also have put in there typing skills. So when is it time to work on typing, and how fast you should be typing at certain ages and things like that. So when I'm making my goals for students, or I really need to know, developmentally where are they supposed to be, I really refer to this. I refer to it a lot, actually. Now, a year later, Handwriting Without Tears also created a standard handwriting expectations. They're very similar because it's based on the same research, but with all the leading researchers. And if you just take a look at both of them, you can see there's a lot of similarities. So when you go to the summit, the Zahner Bloser page, the HW21 summit page, you have to scroll down to the bottom of the page and then look for this title. Okay, and then for Handwriting Without Tears, it's a very direct link. Okay, so actually, it's probably easier just to type in handwritingstandards.com than it is to type all this in. Okay, but I just wanted you to have both. So you can take a look. Really, it's a matter of preference on what kind of format you like the best. I tend to prefer this one, but it really just depends on your own preference. So what I've done is I looked at the handwriting expectations between those two, and I kind of generalized it for you so you can have an idea of where they really should be. So in preschool, the goal is for children, they really developmentally should be able to print several capitals and numbers and write recognizable names. Okay? Now, we know that in preschool, they're expected to do even more than that, but developmentally, you know, especially if you're trying to qualify or not qualify them for therapy, that's developmentally where they really should be. For kindergarten, children are expected to print most letters and numbers in a simple 3-word sentence, and their name should be in title case, which means that they should have upper and lowercase letters. And first grade, they should be able to print all their letters and numbers and a simple 4-word sentence and their name and title case. Second grade, they really should be proficient in all printing skills. So obviously, as they get older, they're going to be faster and faster and more efficient. But in second grade is when they should have the ability to really think. Yes, by the end of the grade, they should be able to do that. And they should be proficient in all of their printing skills. So they really should have some automatic skills. Will there be some letter reversals? Yeah, probably. But for the most part, proficient with printing skills by the end of second grade. And then that's why they recommend doing starting cursive skills in third grade, which we all know that doesn't always happen. But if it is going to happen, some schools do it at the end of second, early third grade. What I've noticed is, in traveling around the United States, is what happens is they learn it in third grade. Some teachers still are teaching it in third grade, but then fourth and fifth don't teach it anymore. And if they use it, great. If they don't, then they don't. But, at least getting their name, being able to write their name in cursive, that type of thing. And some kids really enjoy writing in cursive. So I have made a game plan for us. You can use it if you want. This is what I tend to do and recommend, is that you continue to teach handwriting of some sort to kindergartners, first and second graders. If they're not proficient by the end of second grade or early third grade, then that's when I tried teaching cursive as a compensation technique. And cursive as a compensation technique, this means that not everyone in the class is learning cursive, only these particular students are learning cursive. To learn something new is often easier than fixing those bad habits. Now, if we have a student with severe motor planning issues, cursive might be a nightmare, right? Because at least they are familiar with print, and learning something new might also be more difficult. But a lot of times, cursive is easier because they're just learning something new. They don't have to go back and check their work because they're not making errors. They're learning it for the first time. And especially with some of our kids who have some mild delays and they may have received OT or some other therapies in the really young grades, pre-K, kindergarten, they had a lot of stuff going on. And those were the grades when they really learned the basics of how to form letters. And so if they had a lot of stuff going on with attention and behavior and sensory issues, they may have just missed that whole idea of how to create letters. So then what they did is they formed bad habits. And so now, they're kind of paying for it in the older grades, even though some of those other issues are better. The other nice thing about cursive is it does eliminate any spacing issues between words, because, to make the next word, you have to pick up your pencil and move on. So it automatically adds a space between each word. And then also reversals. You really don't reverse letters with cursive. Other things are created, definitely. They may have an interesting formation of things that don't look like the letter it's supposed to be. But, a lot of times this is a good game plan for students. If cursive was taught, and like I said, it's only if cursive was taught. Sometimes I don't recommend cursive because I know that they have severe motor planning issues and it's just not going to be a good strategy for them. And there's limited progress. Then that's when I would go to start teaching typing. So really, third grade, they might start. I might recommend that they start working on typing as a compensation technique for handwriting. Now, years ago when I started doing the handwriting workshops, that was a big deal. Nowadays, typing is even taught in first grade, kindergarten, so, and now the issue is, how soon can we teach typing? Well, I still really feel like you need to teach some type of fine motor printing or handwriting strategy because of all the research that shows that when you write something down, it helps your cognitive skills. It helps you retain the information. Think about all of you out there that might be taking notes tonight. If you're taking notes, may you ever read them again? Half of you probably will never read them again. But just the fact that you wrote down the note helps you remember the information. You know, it's a multi-sensory experience. The more things you're doing with your brain and your body to help you remember that information, the better. So if I'm typing notes, I don't remember it nearly as well as if I write it, if I handwrite it. Okay, so that's just a little idea behind that. Touch typing is when you have all 5 fingers on the keyboard. You're not, essentially you're not looking at the keys. You're just looking at the screen. 2-finger typing is what a lot of people are doing nowadays, especially because of iPads. Now, I type 120 words per minute with touch typing. I don't look at the keys. So to see people 2-finger typing, it just kind of irks me a little bit, just because, I'm like, you could try, but I know that if they have a fine motor issue with handwriting, the odds are that they're going to be able to use every single one of their fingers separately to type efficiently is probably not going to work very well as either. So 2-finger typing, there's research that shows that kids can type between 40 and 60 words per minute, or people can type between 40 and 60 words per minute with 2-finger typing. Because of tablets and iPads now, it's almost impossible to touch type on an iPad. So kids who are learning to type might be learning to type on something like that or a cell phone. So, it's not the end of the world. So again, if I know they already have a motor planning issue, if I know they already have severe fine motor issues, yeah, I might go from trying to teach handwriting up until 2nd grade and then go straight to 2-finger typing as a compensation technique. If that all just does not work out, speech recognition software is really going to be the last resort. Again, that also might not work, because a lot of times our kids who have motor planning or low muscle tone also have speech issues, and so they're not going to be fluent, and they're not going to be what's the word I'm looking for? You're not going to be able to understand their speech either. However, some of the Dragon Dictation apps that are out there on tablets are very, very good, and they do work better a lot of times than the ones that you would install on an actual computer. And the reason for that is because you can, the apps can only be used with an internet connection. So the Dragon Dictation or the speech recognition software is being as a whole dictionary of words and sounds that it's using from the internet. So it really picks up on a lot better. When you download it to a computer, like a program onto a computer, it's only using what it has through that software, through that program. So the apps do tend to work a lot better, but they have to slow down their speech. They have to be clear. So that also takes some training as well. Okay, so we'll talk about cursive a little bit more at the end, but as far as handwriting screenings go, now this is really where I've gone to, I don't always use handwriting evaluations. One thing I forgot to tell you is that for 3 years, I owned and operated a handwriting summer camp, and so because that was my own business I did on the side, I did the full-out handwriting evaluations with scores and percentages and all the different kinds. And when I'm working in the school system, though, first of all, I don't always have all that time to some of those evaluations take a long time to score. But also because of I don't want to give out all those really low percentages, because I know that the percentages will be low, I do the handwriting screenings, which also gives some really nice information. So let's talk about those. Tyler had a question, do you recommend any good speech recognition apps? So I absolutely recommend the Dragon Dictation app. I actually really love the app called Paperport Notes, and I'm going to type that in. Paperport, P-O-R-T, Notes. Paperport Notes is an app that is made by Dragon Dictation, the Dragon Dictation company. And I talk about this in the iPad webinar, actually. But what that does is it allows you to download or upload, I guess, a worksheet. So you can take a picture of anything you want, turn it into a PDF, and open it up in that Paperport Notes app. So now you have a worksheet, okay, on your iPad. And what happens then is that you can press the text button. You can type in your answers anywhere on the worksheet. You can press the little pencil button so you can handwrite or circle or star or whatever, draw math problems, whatever, on the worksheet. And the other feature that this has that a lot of them do not is it also has the Dragon Dictation software. So at any times you can press the microphone and start speaking, and it dictates what you want to say right onto the worksheet. You save the worksheet and you send it to the teacher. And so I talk about that a lot more specifically in my webinar. It's an iPad 1 webinar. And it's an amazing app. It really is. And it's free. If you upload or if you download the latest version for the iPad, there will be a microphone available there. It's not Dragon Dictation, but it is a microphone. It does work fine, but it's nice that the Dragon Dictation software is there. It's a little more special ed friendly for our students that have more speech issues. Okay, so handwriting screenings. Now, Handwriting Without Tears, it's definitely an amazing program out there, and it for handwriting. When I am certified in Zahner-Bloser, I'm also certified in Handwriting Without Tears, so I really got to see the major differences between those two main handwriting programs. And what Zahner-Bloser says is that it was created for the 80% of the classroom. 80% of the classroom are going to be your regular ed kids. 20% of them might have issues with that. Handwriting Without Tears is the opposite. It was created for the 20%, right? Which essentially would help everyone, honestly. But Zahner-Bloser is definitely more correlated to the Common Core and using literacy skills. Handwriting Without Tears is definitely really, really improving on that and really adding more information to their lessons. But, for our students with special needs, and we're working just on Handwriting Without Tears, does have some really good stuff. So one of the things that they have, which is amazing that it's free, are the screenings. So they have a pre-K assessment, and then they have a regular screener. This is the pre-K assessment. So you can see what is available through the pre-K assessment. They have to name 6 pictures, 6 colors. They have to color in 2 pictures at least, but you can color in all of those pictures at the top. You're looking at their crayon grip, what kind of grip they're having there, name and tracing the shapes, copying the shapes. They have to draw a person. They have to name 10 letters, name 9 numbers, and they have to try to write their name. So, you're looking at all these basic things. This is what is expected of a pre-K student. And so definitely by the end of pre-K, they should have this and more. But it's nice to have a pre and post test for pre-K as well. For the K through 4 grades, and obviously you can use this for older grades too, but it's primarily used for K through 4, there's the Screener of Handwriting Proficiency. Now, they have really done an amazing job with this screener. It's free to use, and you do have to sign in to their website, but it is free. I'll show you how to do some of the basics tonight, but basically they have how-to videos that are available all over the website, which is really helpful as well. It's going to tell you how to administer the screener. Very, very easy to do for an entire classroom. It's going to tell you how to score it. You can do it right on the computer, or you can do it on a hard copy paper version to score it. It will generate a report for you. It will generate a report for if you're doing a whole classroom, it will generate an individual report for each student, and it will also generate a whole class report. So you could take that whole class report, show it to a principal, and say, I need to push into this classroom. There are some significant issues in here. Or, no, I don't need to push into this classroom. They're really doing pretty well. And then it also gives you some remediation strategies as well. So just so you have an idea, what it's doing here is this is what a report looks like when you print it out for the entire classroom. What it's going to do, it's going to give you some basic categories, and it's going to show you kind of where the students are, okay? And these are called whisker boxes. So each box has a whisker at the top and the bottom. The top of the whisker shows the range of performance for the highest scoring students. So the top 20% is going to be this little part right here. Okay, the bottom whisker shows the range of the performance for the lowest scoring students, so the bottom 20% of the class, and then the majority of the class is right in this box. Okay, so what we would use this really for, I would say, is response to intervention. This could be a great way to do response to intervention tier 1 type of strategies, kind of figure out, do I need to do a tier 2 strategy with this class? Do I need to do or student? Do I even need to do a tier 1 intervention? Is this something the class needs? Do I even need to teach handwriting in this classroom? Which is great, because some teachers are going to be like, wow, I don't have to. And some are like, oh, wow, I really need to figure this out and figure out how to get handwriting in this classroom, because it's going to make a big difference with all of their other skills as well. Okay? So here's that whisker box. So you can take a look at that. Some of the other things you want to pay attention to when you're giving the screener. Screener's going to take about 5 minutes probably, but one of the things you might want to do is if you're going to score it later on the computer, it's going to ask you some other questions that are not right on the screening form. It's going to, their general neatness, their speed, their posture. It's not going to ask you like what was their letter speed or word per minute. It's going to just say, were they the slow? It's going to ask you generally. You might want to jot down on the kid's form, were they the last kid to finish? Were they the first kid to finish? That kind of thing. Posture, pencil grip. So what I usually do when I'm doing this screener is I'll make little initials for things. I'll walk around. If he was the first kid to finish, so I know that they have very fast speed, I might write FS for fast speed. If they were the lowest or the slowest kid in the class, I would write SS for slow speed. Posture, if they had a posture issue, I don't have to write exactly what it was. I'm just going to put a P because I know they had a posture issue. If they had a grip, some kind of funky grip going on, I would write a G. If they're not using their helper hand, I would put an HH, something like that. So I just jot those down as I'm doing the screening with the kids. It still only takes 5 minutes, but then I have that information for later on when I'm putting it into the computer, and I also have it for a post-test, okay? So you're going to pay attention to that. You're also going to pay attention to sentence skills, and is there a starting capital, mixed capitals, that's stuff that you can take a look later when you're looking at their actual handwriting. But this is an example of what the kindergartner screening looks like. You're going to have them write their name at the top, and then basically you're going to say what these words are. So you're going to say, turtle starts with T, write an uppercase T. Owl starts with O, write an uppercase O. All right, they don't have to know that owl starts with O. You're going to tell them that. Just giving them extra little visual, okay? Fish starts with F, write an uppercase F. Then you're going to do numbers, and then you're going to do the same thing with lowercase. Eagle. Eagle starts with E, write in lowercase e under the eagle, okay? And so what Handwriting Without Tears did is they realized that these were the most common letters, so that's what they're asking you to use for the screener. So you're not looking at all of them, you're just looking at some of them. And then for every grade, there's going to be a different sentence. So kindergarten is a 3-word sentence, first grade is a 4-word sentence, so on. And so you can see the kindergarten screener and the first grade screener are identical, except the sentence is going to be different. Okay. When you're doing the sentence, it's going to have you say something like, dogs have 4 legs. So let's spell dogs. D, or the first letter is D. D-O-G-S. And you're not going to say uppercase or lowercase. Okay, so they want later for you to look and say, did they know that a sentence has to start with an uppercase? At the end of the sentence, you're going to say, that is the end of the sentence. You're not going to say put a period. But you're going to have one kid in the class, because it happens almost every single time I do it, don't forget to put the period at the end. So then it kind of ruins it for everyone. But, you know, the idea is that we want to know if they can put a period at the end. So there's specific language that you're going to use that you just need to print from the website. And if you need help with scoring, they have a whole scoring packet. But oh my gosh, it's so easy. It's so much easier than doing the actual scoring from some of the other handwriting evaluations. And then if you want, I mean, you really could use this handwriting screening as a template and then even add more letters if you want, so that, you know, you're using it for your OT screenings as well, so that you can progress monitor a little bit better. And so now I'm going to show you, this is the second grade screener, and so now they kind of got rid of the pictures. You know, it doesn't look as young as the other one. It has a different sentence, okay, but uppercase, numbers, name, uppercase, numbers, lowercase, and a sentence. Now, this is how you would score it if you were in a, if you didn't want to use technology to score it. If you're not a tech-savvy person, you just like to want to use the paper version, you can totally use this. You would just put the kids' names on there. And basically what you're doing is you're checking off areas of concern. So then 8 to 10 weeks goes by, you do the screener again, you want to see less checks. Right? They're no longer a concern because it's only a screener. You know, it's not, we're not really giving a lot of specific information. So the goal for this is that you're going to be doing 8 to 10 weeks. The nice thing with Handwriting Without Tears is if you do the online version of scoring, it will remind you to do it. So don't forget to progress monitor, which is kind of cool. This is the cursive screener. Sometimes this might be what I do just to see if they're a good candidate for cursive. You know, can they even figure out some of these letters? Okay, so I might not use it actually as an evaluation or a screening. So basically you're looking at some lowercase, you're looking at some of the connections, how they would connect letters, and then some of the uppercase. To be honest, when I do this, and I don't do this one very often anymore, I don't even do the uppercase letters because the uppercase letters are just so bizarre looking sometimes that I think if they wrote a print version of the uppercase letter and a cursive lowercase letters for a word, it's not the end of the world because at least they're more legible than they were. Because I pretty much only use this as a compensation technique now. So that's, and then they have a cursive version of the checklist and how you would look and score it if you wanted to do the hard copy. But let's take a look at what it looks like online. Okay, now if you wanted to do this online, it's free, so it's kind of really, really nice system that they have. You do have to sign in, so you have your own sign-in password, so there's a confidentiality thing there. And then basically the most work that you're going to have is putting all the kids' names in at the beginning. Okay, so basically you are going to add the names. Once you do it once, you won't have to do it again for the rest of the year. Like I said, you're going to see reminder emails to get the screening done throughout the year. So, you know, you do have to add some of this information. If you don't know it, then just don't put it in, okay? You're going to put the teacher's name in there and the grade, because then it's going to organize it by teacher and it's going to organize it by grade, okay? This is how you add the kids in. So on this page, you would just start typing names in, gender, date of birth, handwriting curriculum, if they have one, do they have an IEP or not, and the teacher name. So it's not, you know, really, really, really difficult. I think the hardest part is putting the birthdays in there. And the reason you want to do that is because it's then going to give you handwriting standards and what is expected of that age. And I don't always put their last names in there. I just put their last letter in there so you can take a look at that. Okay, so then what happens is when you go to score a student, this is what it looks like. Okay, and let me just go back real quick. Okay, so if I wanted to add or delete a test, okay, you would go to the kid's name and you would see over here delete test or add test. Okay, and once you do that, the next screen that you're going to see is this one. Okay, now this is the screener. This is exactly what we just went over. Basically what you're going to do now is click on the letters that they didn't do well. So you're going to have their screener right in front of you, and what you're going to do is you're going to say, oh, they didn't make their F the correct way, like their memory, they didn't even know what an F looked like, so they didn't write one. Or maybe they put a G instead of an F. That means that they don't know what an F is, right? So you're going to click on the F. When we did numbers, they really had no idea what a 5 looks like. You can tell that they don't know what it looks like, or they put a different number, or they left it blank. You would put that there. Orientation, any letters that they didn't know how to make are then going to be blocked out for the rest. So you don't even have to figure that out. Okay, it already does it for you. So now orientation, maybe they knew their F, but they made it backwards, right? Or their B, or maybe the D down here. Okay, once you start clicking on these things, it puts a line through it. Okay, and it does it automatically, and it totals it up for you. And then it also totals all of the totals. So in memory, uppercase, they got 1 wrong, but for all of the letters and numbers in the screener, they got 3. Okay, and you can see how the F, the 4, and the 8 were blocked out. Okay, and then these are some of the things down here that I said you kind of had to pay attention to. If you don't put anything there, it's fine. They just will leave it blank. Okay, and then you submit. Bam, you're done. So it's all about clicking. That's all you do. Click, 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 and it totals it for you. So now look at what happens. What it did for these categories: memory, orientation, placement, and sentence. Memory, orientation, placement, and sentence. What it did is it totaled it into percentages for you. And if it's a red area, then it was below average range for that grade level. Okay, so you will then see that there are a lot of red areas. They are using this based on their standards that they use with the print tool, the Handwriting Without Tears print tool. So they're standardized types of scores that they've already made for the print tool that they're using in the screen here as well. So you then kind of have an idea, this kid right here has some things going on, right? But, this one, this kid only got 1 below, 1 area that was below, really not a big issue. This column is the overall score for that student. So you can kind of see, where they lie amongst everyone else. So it's really kind of a helpful thing. Again, this is what you're gonna look at. If you want to see the if you see the green chart and the paper right here, you can see that if that's there, that means that a report has been written for you. So it will show each area with the specific percentage they received and the grade appropriate amount of what they should be receiving at that grade. And it will also show you remediation techniques that are Handwriting Without Tears specific. So if you're not using Handwriting Without Tears, don't use those remediation techniques, obviously, because they're going to be very specific to handwriting without tears. But use the scores. I mean, so everybody can use it. This is something anyone can use, no matter what program you end up using for remediation techniques. Okay, and then if you go up here where this is one classroom right here, this is another classroom. So now you'll see there's a little green chart with paper next to it. That means that they've also created a report for this entire classroom. Okay, so if you click on that, what you'll see is that it wrote a report based on the classroom. It'll show you those whisper charts for the entire classroom, and it'll give you a great way to visual to a principal or administrator to justify those, handwriting lessons. It's also just really nice for the teachers to see what they specifically need to work on and if they need to work on anything. Okay? All right, so now let's talk about some printing skills. And if you have handwriting samples, right, just in your mind, I know it's summertime right now, just think of some specific kids and some issues that they may have as we're going through this. Are there any questions about screenings? Okay. Oops. All right. So let's talk about the different components to printing. The memory. Okay, so Tyler has a question. How do you get teachers to buy into doing an entire class screening? Well, it really kind of just depends on the teacher and your rapport with the teacher, I think. I think especially, it's probably easier if you've been there for a little while, but if you know every year, I'm going to get like 5 handwriting referrals from a particular teacher. That might be a good way to be like, did you know that there's this screening tool that we can do for the whole classroom and we can see, how many, we'll nip it in the bud at the beginning of the year, that kind of thing. And then we can try to tackle it from the beginning instead of waiting through until, January to figure it out. And the other thing, Tyler, is I don't know if your school is using response to intervention. If you start throwing out response to intervention tier 1, you can say this is a great strategy for you or me to do with you to give out a handwriting screener. The other thing is that you can talk to the principal about it. You can say caseloads every year getting higher and higher. There's a lot of handwriting referrals out there, and then could we work something out where we have to do these screenings at the beginning of the year just so we know what's going on? Okay, so it kind of depends, I think, on the rapport of what you're dealing with on a regular basis. There are going to be teachers that are going to, or anybody who's going to be very resistant to it, and then it's just not going to work. But you kind of take it with a grain of salt. But even knowing that it's available out there, I think some people don't even know it's available and how much easier it actually can make their lives in the long run. That it's not something you have to create. You don't have to recreate anything, and you don't even have to score it. It scores it for you, so it's really pretty easy. Next question is, do you make adjustments for cognition? Do you use the lower grade level screener versus the actual grade level? Yes. So that's what I would do, is I would input them at a lower grade. So when I put their name in, I would say that if they were a 5th grader, but they had a very low cognition, I knew that their IQ is really low, and maybe they were in a self-contained special ed classroom, I might say they were in 2nd grade or in 1st grade, and then it would base it on that. Okay? And sometimes, another thing I did is I fooled around with it. Sometimes I did that, and then sometimes I would just fudge their date of birth and put a different year, like whatever age equivalent they were. I would put that year of birth in there because I'm just doing it for scoring purposes. I wasn't adding it to the report or anything like that, or commenting on that. I was just putting it in there so I would have some something to compare it to for what's appropriate for that age. So you might want to fool around with it and see what works best. And then Christina says, when would you do a class kindergarten screening? At the beginning of the year? Yeah, Christina, I actually do. I do them at the beginning of the year. It's usually a disaster, nightmare type of thing. I usually don't even do the lowercase letters. Sometimes I just do uppercase, and I do numbers, and then I have them draw a person on the back, and I collect them, and then 8 to 10 weeks later, maybe I do the lowercase, and so on and so on. It kind of depends. While you're standing there doing the screening, if it looks like a nightmare, like, oh my gosh, these kids have some issues, right? They really don't, a majority of the kids don't have an awareness of the letters, then I won't go on. I just kind of stop it, have them draw a picture on the back. Sometimes it works out really well, and I can see what a major difference between the first day and 8 to 10 weeks later, and then especially the end of the year. So, I don't think it hurts to do it at the beginning of the year for kindergarten, because I'm prepared to know that it's not going to be great. Because, a lot of times kids haven't even made it to a preschool setting, so they don't have any awareness whatsoever. But that then tells me, okay, those are the kids that the teacher needs to look out for, and that I might be getting a referral for. And then some teachers, I don't always do it with them. Some teachers do it by themselves. And I might just spend a lunch break with them teaching them how to use it. And it's really easy, and it's really easy to use. Okay? I don't think we have any more questions. Okay. All right, so the components for printing are memory. So memory, like I said, is do they even know what the letter is? If I say the letter R, do they write some version of a letter R? Okay, then they know it. If I tell them letter R and they make a letter P, I know that they don't have a good memory of that letter. They don't even know how to do it. They're making something up. Maybe they just leave it blank. Maybe it's a scribble. That means that they don't have a good memory of that letter. Reversals, kind of self-explanatory. Placement on the line, component of printing, definitely an issue. Size of the letters, whether it's teeny tiny or way too big, there are different standards for what's appropriate. Where they're starting their letter. Now, I think over the years I've kind of let this one go. Sometimes I do think it's important for them to learn where to start their letter, but if it's a second grader that I'm going to get a referral for, and yes, I'm going to end up working on some handwriting skills and whatever delays they have, to teach them where to start their letters at such an older age, it might not be in their best interest, because it's going to be way too hard to correct those habits if they don't have the motivation to do it. So starting position absolutely is important when you're teaching them for the first time, but again, to try to remediate that down the line, that's going to be a very difficult thing to do, but we'll talk about it. And then obviously where they start their letter is going to impact how they form it. Right? It just goes hand in hand. Spacing is a component. Speed is definitely a component, definitely an issue. And so all that put together are the components of printing. Now, what I do here is I kind of give you an idea. What would you do? The point of it is to show you that, what's first? What pictures do you think developmentally are first? Okay, so kind of while you're looking at this, I'll give you a second. Put them in order, of the developmental order of where you think they should go. Now, this is the real order. Okay, we have random scribbling. That's where they start. They have controlled scribbling. They have some mock writing. Maybe they're doing some shapes, maybe a letter here and there. Now they're actually making letters. They might be putting them together without any idea of how to spell something. Obviously, this kid was trying to spell dolphin, right? And then we actually have writing words. Is it beautiful? No. Well, it's a younger child. What if I told you this was a fifth grader, right? So the point of this slide is to show you that if a child is giving me level 2 or even level 3, and I'm expecting them to write like a fourth grader, okay, it's not appropriate, right? We have to go through these developmental stages. There are tons of small steps in between them. We need them to write, we need them to complete testing, we need them to get their thoughts out on paper, but there's so many components that are in the beginning. So it just kind of gives you a nice little idea behind that. So here's a little case study for us. This was a student I had in a handwriting camp. His name was Ethan, and he was 4 years old. This is his before screening, okay? So he knew what the things were. He knew what some of the colors were. He was able to he was able to color on the picture but not stay in the lines, right? He had a very alternative type of grip. It was not a palm grip. It was not a standardized grip, regular grip. It was odd. It was, not efficient for him. His handwriting preference, did he hold the paper while he was coloring, okay? And then you can see he had a very hard time just tracing, okay? And then even more difficulty with copying shapes. And then he didn't really have any awareness of what letters were and numbers. Some of them he did know. And then this is how he drew his name. This is his E-T-H-A-N. Okay? Now, when you're looking at him making these letters, you can really see that he had the idea of how to form them, but his control was just really, really difficult, okay? And he obviously, was being silly. He made a really long bottom line for the E. His attention span was really limited. He knew it was something that was really hard for him. So when I had him in the handwriting camp, we did scavenger hunts. We did memory games. We did teaching writing letters by their different similarities. So like Handwriting Without Tears does, they teach their letters in similarities, not alphabetical order. We used tons of multisensory approaches. We did where we had to go shopping. So he was on a scooter board, and he had a paper bag, and he had letters that on the other side. That was the store. And I had to tell him, I showed him a letter, and then he had to go to the store and find it. Or sometimes I would give him a shopping list, and I would put all the letters on a piece of paper, and he had to bring the shopping list to the other side of the room and shop for the letters and then come back. And then when he came back, he'd have to create them by building them or, rolling out Play-Doh or whatever, okay? Or sometimes we would go shopping for things that started with that letter, okay? Because this is obviously a kid that needed to work on memory skills, right? Just very low, poor awareness of what the letters were and how to make them. And also he needed to work on his upper extremity strength, his core strength, his fine motor strength. So we had to implement all that stuff, right? And it's like, sometimes it's overwhelming. So what are we going to do to do it all at the same time? So that was what we did with the handwriting camp. And after 6 sessions, he was able to do this. I had to still give him verbal cues. Anytime you see VC, it meant I gave him a verbal cue. I didn't do hand over hand. If I had to give him hand over hand, I put assistance there for him. But basically, I would talk him through the letters, big slide down, little line across. That type of stuff. And this was an amazing difference. And this was only after 6 sessions. He also had some tremor things going on. Obviously, that's not going to go away overnight. And he was a little guy. I don't typically give grippers out for the little people, but I did give him a crossover grip because he had such an issue with his tremor and his upper extremity strength. He had so many sensory issues that honestly it was even more for the fact that I just wanted him to want to hold the pencil, and he wanted to hold it when he got to hold on to the squishy thing on his pencil, So when teachers ask, or parents ask, well, how are we going to get through the entire alphabet in an entire year? Well, it can be done, This was a handwriting camp, so we had a small amount of time in the summer to really address it. So at least he was going into kindergarten with some awareness, where if he didn't do the handwriting camp, he would have been back at this stage, okay? So it kind of just gives you an idea of how much improvement we can do. So let's talk about some of the things that we did do with him, or I did with him, that we can try for some of his areas. Memory. that was the area that Ethan had to work on the most. Okay, so even before we learn how to write the letters, kids need to have an understanding of what they are. And so when we show them one, they should be able to state it. If they can't recall them verbally, it's pointless to learn how to write them, right? So we need all different types of visual memory games. So one of the things that we talk about, or I talk about a lot, is that we got to do it in a way that's super fun. Okay, so there's all different kinds of visual memory games. But then also, we want to build the letters and make them without even trying to draw them first. Okay, we want to, and then when we do draw them, but even before we draw them on paper, I want them to be able to draw them in all different types of sensory ways. Okay, we'll talk about that. Then, finally, when they are drawing them on paper, let's just start with the letters of their name so that they have some success. And then I do agree that we should teach capitals first, and that's something Handwriting Without Tears teaches, and Zaner Bolzer does not teach it that way. But I have noticed that it makes a big difference when they are aware of the uppercase letter formation. Really does make it so that their memory is solid of what that letter looks like. And then those lowercase letters are very, very confusing. There are so many that look so alike. And if you try to do that first, it's just confusing. Have there been times when I've had to teach lowercase first? Yeah, I've had to. But it is way harder. It takes longer, actually, because they just don't get it. Okay? So, first we have to, we can do different types of games where they learn the difference between upper and lowercase letters. Here are some different games that you can try. These are some of my favorites. Sequence letters is one of my favorite games, and it's cool because it's all uppercase. You have cards, and so I adapted for every kid, but you're supposed to play where you get 3 cards and 3 different letters, and when you choose to play one of your letters, so say if you choose to play the letter P, you then have to find a picture on the game board that starts with the P sound, okay? So you're working on cognitive skills and speech sounds and letter recognition, and so they really have to be aware of all of that stuff, and it's really, really good. And then, of course, because they're in OT, they then have to write the letter P maybe on a chalkboard, or maybe they have to build it with Play-Doh, or something like that. Eventually, for the older grades, I might have them write a word that starts with the P, the actual picture word that they found, or maybe a sentence that has that word in it, or something like that. So I could play this all day long with a lot of different grades. Scrabble, Scrabble alphabet game. That one is, it's called Alphabet Scoop, actually, and it's by Scrabble. What it is it's a bowl of letters, Scrabble letters, and you get cards that have words on them, and what you have to try to do is scoop out a big scoop of letters and try to find the letters that match the word that you're looking for. So I often don't even use these cards because I would like it if those tiles fit on the card, but they don't. So what I do is I have them write the word, or I write the word depending on what it is, and then, or even their name, okay? And then they have to scoop letters until they find all the letters in there. And whoever does it first closes up the pot, they get a point. Then you keep playing, okay? Zingo games, those are awesome. They're made by Think Fun. They have Zingo numbers, and they also have Zingo words, and they have Zingo letters. They have all different kinds of Zingo games. But those are fun because it really is helping work on memory connections between them. Okay, and then just games that you might make, right? Gosh, if you're on Pinterest, you could find a million different types of games for letter memory. Just, matching upper and lowercase letters, put them around the room, make them get on the scooter board. Maybe they're in the classroom and they're working on that. So a lot of times what I have them do if they're in the classroom, I recommend to the teacher to have them lay underneath their tables or their desks with a buddy. And one buddy says the letter, and the other buddy has a flashlight, and all the letters are taped underneath the table, okay? And now they have, when kid 1 says the letter B, kid 2 has to find the letter B underneath the table with the flashlight, okay? And they keep doing that back and forth, switch places. You know, that's kind of a fun thing. Or maybe kid 1 shows them a picture of the uppercase letter and they have to find the lowercase underneath the table. I like it. It gives them a sensory experience. It's working on their visual skills. And it's just something different and fun for them to be motivated by. So like I said, when it's time to actually write, learning to build the letters, how to make the letters, you know, building letters out of various types of materials. My favorite thing out of this list is cooked spaghetti because it's cheap and a fun, weird texture. So I might make a pound of spaghetti and use it, or have the teachers do that, and it sticks to the table. They get to, you know, build all different types of things. Making glue letters. So what you might do is, you know, have them, you draw the word, and then they have to squeeze the glue onto the word, and then pinch some Jell-O mix or sprinkle, you know, the Jell-O mix on the glue, and then what you have is a scratch and sniff letter. Now, a kid is most likely going to go home and say, I made a scratch and sniff letter more than of the letter B than they are going to say that I practiced B 40 times, right? Another one is using letter scavenger hunt, where I show you the letter, you need to find it, that type of thing. So you can make letters out of their bodies. You can try all different types of things. Like I said, Pinterest has a ton. One of the favorite things I really like is using the plastic Easter eggs, where you can encourage even more fine motor skills. So what I would do is I'd give them letters on the table, you know, on a piece of paper, and then they have to walk around the room and find all the Easter eggs, crack it open. Is that the letter? Maybe it's the uppercase version or the lowercase version there. Bring it back. Okay, so they're doing some matching and tell me what the letter is. If they can't tell me what the letter is, they have to put it back and hide it for someone else, and then they have to keep going. That type of thing. So this is a great website. This is, I believe she's a stay-at-home mom, and she has a really good website, and she has a ton of those types of fun, silly, sensory games that teaches basically memory of letters and the awareness of those letters. Using multisensory techniques to draw the letters. Now it's time to draw them, but do not draw them on paper yet, right? We want to do them in different sensory experiences. These are a whole bunch of different ones. This is one I learned from the Zahner Bloser certification course, and it's modeling clay. So a lot of times I have modeling clay and I never really use it. I don't know about you guys. So it's kind of nice to have something to do with it. You get a little Tupperware container like this and you smush the modeling clay in there real flat in there. Then use a pencil or a dowel or, I don't know, chopstick or whatever, and give them a letter, and they have to draw the letter in the modeling clay. It provides so much great resistance. It really helps with muscle memory of how to make that letter. You know, now we can use that Kool-Aid or Jell-O mix for drawing. Now their fingers are going to smell like it, and it's going to be a nice sensory experience. Also, one of the things that I've done too, and it's kind of a fun thing, is we have a lot of rugs in our school. They do rugs on the floor, or you can go to the rug store and get those rug samples, okay? And different rug samples. Usually use the really flat kind, and then have them draw with chalk on the rug. Because all you have to do then is kind of stomp on it or wipe it or even get like a little bit of water and it goes away. But it's kind of like a really cool sensory experience because it provides a lot more resistance. So after you're drawing these letters, you're singing and dancing with the music, you're doing all that kind of stuff too. It's really working on those memory skills. All right, let's see. Now it would be time to actually start writing on paper, and this is where you might teach them to write their first name. Like I said, I tend to teach the uppercase letters first. In my school district, I work in 3 schools, and I have about 11 kindergarten classrooms, And every year, the kindergarten classrooms have me sign up for me to teach a handwriting class. So yeah, I have 60-something kids on my caseload, but if some of those kids are in that classroom, I do count that as an OT session. So that works out really well. And I schedule the kindergarten classrooms that have the OT kids in them first before I finish, and then I finish the rest of my schedule and then add any other extra kindergarten classrooms. And I do teach handwriting lessons on a weekly basis. And I use a lot of my own ideas. I use Handwriting Without Tears. I use Zaner Blozar. I use a lot of different things, Pinterest ideas. And we always learn about a group of letters, then we make them, and then we write them in our books. So that has worked out. I've done that now for, I think, 4 years. And, the kids absolutely love it. They ask for Mrs. Wiggins when she's coming in for handwriting, and it's kind of nice for them to want to do handwriting. The teachers sign up for it every single year. And, the first 2 years when only a couple of them signed up, then halfway through the year, they're like, can we get started now? Because they realized that those classrooms were making a lot of progress with it. So it worked out really well. It's something that it depends on your school. It depends on if you're a contract employee or not. It kind of depends. I'm fortunate enough to be able to do it, and I try to fit it in as best as I can. So using capitals, you're going to teach the letters step by step. Avoid using those dot-to-dot letters. Let's take a look here at Ethan. What he was doing, and a lot of kids do, is when they try to do dot-to-dot letters, they try to connect the dots. So they're doing these short, choppy movements. I would much rather have Ethan make a straight line and not stay in the line than I would have him connect the dots. That just doesn't really teach him anything, right? So he was doing that, and then I told him to stop. So then I said, well, let's try this. I'll make highlighted letters. And he was able to figure that out and trace it, not well, but over time he made some really good progress with that compared to where he was in the first place. Okay, there's a question, I think, or a comment. I recommend at some point during the first 9 weeks, occasionally there are children who have had no formal training prior to entering kindergarten. Handwriting Without Screeners are available to use the beginning of the year, mid-year, and end year. Yeah, exactly. So thanks, Sheila. She was just responding to that question, but especially for the on-demand people. I just was reading it out loud. But, yeah, it kind of depends on what's happening in that classroom. All right. Start all the letters at the top. That really teaches where we're going to start our letters, and then it's going to help with our formation. What I like, especially to work on size, but we'll talk about it again later, is to write on paper strips and then gradually decrease the size. This works like a charm. It really does for kids that are writing really humongous, especially for those pre-K kids that were just learning to write their names and they come into kindergarten. If they have a smaller piece of paper, they will write smaller. Yeah, it might get on the table, but for the most part, they're going to try to keep it on the paper. So that really helps with gradually decreasing the size of how big they're writing their letters. Another thing that a lot of our worksheets do is there's often a line at the top, and you tell them to write their name on the line, right? Well, what we usually see is that they write these humongous letters, right? Literally on top of the line, not above the line, right? So some of the researchers I've read through their books is that the reason that kids do that is because they're very self-centered when they're really young. So what they will do is they'll start close to their body, which is at the bottom, and start writing from there up. Okay, so that affects writing at the top. And then at the same time, when we say write on the line, they touch the line and then they start making their letters. So if they touch the bottom line, they're going to start at the bottom and go up. Okay. The other thing is that sometimes when those lines are on the top, they have all this space to write in. So of course it's going to affect their size. So one of the strategies someone recommended a while ago that I've been using for a long time when I have a kid that has that specific issue, is I make the line at the bottom and I have them right under the line. And so they touch the line and then they go down. And over time, we bring the line down, 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 closer to the bottom so that they're decreasing their size. So, a teacher has to kind of go hand in hand with you with that so it's consistent, but it's a good strategy for a kid who has that specific issue. This is a great app that really helps with writing. It's by Ingenie. Ingenie, I don't know how I say it actually, because you always read it. I never hear anybody say it. But it's called Write My Name. They have some really great other apps too, but this is my favorite one. What happens here is when you go into the app, you press the My Name, and you can add kids. So you press Edit, which is this little white thing right here, and this little screen will come up, and you can take a picture of the student's face, okay? Then you're going to type the kid's name in, and then you're going to press record. When you press record, you have the kid say their own name, and then you press confirm. And now all the kids that you're going to have on this app are going to be right here, okay? And what happens is when you touch their name, their face and their name appears, and they have to trace their name. I really, really like the formation of how they have the kids making the letters with this. It's very, very good. It also shows them, like if they go off the line, it doesn't tell them they've made an error. They're allowed to do that for the most part. If they're all over the place, it has you come back. But what it does is that when you're done writing your name, your big face comes up on the screen, and it shows you how you wrote it without the background. So if they wrote their name all scribbly, it will show a scribbly name, So sometimes I feel like when kids are tracing, they're okay with it because they still see their name the right way behind their scribbles. They're not on the line. So it's nice that goes away and they can see how they really did it. And some kids are happy about it and some kids are not happy about it. And then their big face comes up, their name comes up, and then they hear their voice, and their own voice says, Ethan! And I say, oh my gosh, that was your voice. I heard it. Let's do it again. That was so cool. And they want to do it over and over again. So what I do is this is the way that I have kids sign into OT. They sign into OT by doing that app, and then we go on. So it's a really kind of fun thing to do, and you can have unlimited kids on there. All right, so as far as letter reversals. Reversals are really tricky because it requires a lot of practice. So if you have a kid that has a lot of letter reversals, they really just need to practice it over and over and over again, but they don't need to practice it on paper. They need to practice it by using some of those readiness skills that we learned with memory. So you're going to be doing it over and over again using all those multi-sensory mediums to draw it in, because that's going to help them retain that muscle memory of what they're supposed to do. So basically everything that we just talked about in memory, that is going to help reversals because they're going to repeat it over and over and over again. The other thing is that if you're building letters, so if, say you want them to build, maybe they're reversing, maybe it's a boy named Ryan, and he's reversing the letter R for his first name over and over and over again all the time. And, we're going to go back to the memory skills. We're going to start building that letter R. Well, when he builds the letter R, the best thing would be to put it on a piece of paper, okay, and put that dot in that upper left corner, because if he starts at the dot and he makes it backwards, reversing it, it's going to fall off the piece of paper, right? So it needs to stay on the paper. So it just kind of gives him a little visual cue of where it needs to be. That's what the nice thing about the wet, dry, try stuff that Handwriting Without Tears uses, because it uses those boards. And if you start in that upper left corner, you can't really reverse it if you start in the upper left corner, because you can't go off the little chalkboard, right? But the idea behind that wet, dry, try can be used with a lot of different things. You can do it with dry erase boards. You can do it when you're building letters. And you can use just, sometimes when I teach those kindergarten classrooms, I just cut up little pieces of construction paper. I use Q-tips, I use wiki sticks, I use popsicle sticks. And so for building the letter, I give everybody a piece of that little construction paper with the dot up in the corner or wherever it needs to be, and they build the letters before we draw them. Okay, and it's really cheap. It just takes time to cut up the paper, and put the dot in the corner. But no matter what thing we're using to build, I always want them to have that background for them to be able to build on. This is a handwriting without tears thing, but basically it's the idea. So when you're giving them that piece of paper to build things on it, when it's time to write it now, these are like those they're like little mini pieces of paper that we've been building on. Now it's time to write on them. But practice really is helpful, learning the difference between the D's and the B's, the W's, I'm sorry, not W's, the S's. There are 3 really great books out there. There's 2 books by Penny Groves that aren't too expensive. They're only like $6.99. And it's called Correcting Reversals, and then they also have Correcting Word Reversals for kids who literally are writing saw instead of was, and then the DB reversals, the PQ reversals, all of that. Those are really nice workbooks to give out to students so that they can practice it in the classroom. So if I do a screening on a kid, and it's not really too bad, but yeah, they're doing some reversals, a Tier 2 intervention would be to address the reversals. So a nice way to do that, especially if a teacher doesn't have a lot of time to be able to address it in, building letters and all that kind of stuff, is to give them one of these workbooks and make sure they're doing a page a day, and then in the next 4 weeks or the next 8 weeks when we have to reevaluate what's going on and either give them another strategy or recommend an evaluation, I can now look at that workbook and see if they've made any progress. And I can say, oh, they've done it. Because a lot of times I give these strategies out as Tier 2 interventions. I don't know if they're really doing them on a daily basis. And now what I'm doing is I'm doing checklists so that I can see data that says, the teacher says, oh yeah, they did it this day, and this day. But for years, or the last couple of years, they were just saying, no, it didn't really work. And then I was really questioning, how often did they really try it? The strategies that I gave for Tier 2 interventions. And I'll tell you now, even with those checklists, those don't always get filled out either. So it's nice for the workbook because I can actually see that they actually did it. And then there's Reversing Reversals. This book is really good too, but it is a much thicker book, which is why it's probably more expensive, but it kind of combines these strategies into one book. So that's another strategy that's available out there. Also, the Letter Reflex app. This is the same company as the app that built Dexteria. Basically what you do here is you see the letter up in the corner and then all these other letters, and what you have to do is flip them. So swipe them, and you have to make them look like this letter. So what's nice about it, when I first did it, all I did was go like this until it turned into the letter, and I was like, oh, cool, I did it. Well, then when you're done with that level, what it does is it actually gives you how much time and a accuracy score. So I got like a 10% accuracy score because I swiped it 100 times every time I tried to make it into the letter B. What would you do for this letter P to turn it into a B? You only need to swipe it once, right? You only need to swipe it once up or down. So it's teaching that directionality skill and learning the difference between those letters. It's a really great app, and definitely, again, something that you can do on a daily basis, and then you can progress monitor it to see if they've been making progress, because you're going to see their accuracy score. So say I have a kid with letter reversal issues, doesn't receive OT, but he was referred for RTI intervention. So I say, okay, teacher has an iPad in the classroom. Let's get this app on their iPad. And now every time they do it, the teacher has to write the accuracy score and what level they were on. So now I have a date, I have an accuracy score, and I have a level, and I can see if they've made progress, right? They can't make it up, so it's on there. And then there's compensation techniques, right? Because, okay, what if, John, for example, occasionally he's 15, occasionally he still has letter reversals. So, I'm not going to go back to doing those multi-sensory things, even though he'd probably love it. just not enough time in that grade level to be able to do all that kind of stuff. So, and he's 15, but what about our fourth graders or our third graders that are still doing those letter reversals? We can give them these little types of techniques on there. My favorite thing is that teaching them that H's turn into B's. What I often will say is that, have you ever heard of a honeybee? If you see honey, what letter does honey start with? H, okay. Well, if you see honey, you will probably see a B. Oops. So if you make an H and close it up, you made a honeybee, right? So that's one thing, and I'll just reiterate that by placing this. I cut this up and put it on a card and tape it to their desk. The other thing is I write A, B, C, D on, I think I put this in, yes, I did put this as a material in your documents. It's H turns into B. It's a Word document. And it looks a little bit more elaborate than this, but I have the alphabet A, B, C, D. First you make a C, turn it into a D. Okay, so feel free to use that, copy it and make it smaller and tape it to people's desks. And these little strategies will help, hopefully. All right, let's talk about this kiddo. He came to my handwriting camp. He was a first grader going into second grade. This was the summer of after his first grade year, okay? And these were his uppercase letters. These were his lowercase letters, all right? And as you can see, he started all his letters at the bottom. These little tabs, these little lines that I have, dots, are where he started his letter, okay? So let's take a look. Does this kid have memory issues? No. If I said the letter, he knew how to make it. Did he have any letter reversals? No. He had the letter Z reversal. It's normal, one or two of those. I don't remember the exact percentages, but it's average. And then, here's the letter Q. He didn't know the letter Q, so that would be a memory issue, but it's only one. Did he have placement on the line issues? Well, not here with this lowercase stuff, but let's just look back. Not really with the uppercase, well, a couple with the uppercase, but the placement on the line issue was especially with when he was writing sentences. So the mom had given me all his handwriting samples, and he was floating about the line for a lot of it. Size was, he was writing very large. It wasn't even too bad during the screening because he was trying really hard, but in his handwriting samples, size was very big. Start, where did he start his letters? Yeah, obviously that's a problem. And because he started them at the bottom, that affected how he formed them. And he had spacing issues, and he also had speed issues. He wrote very, very fast. So he knew his letters. Legibility really was his major issue, and it doesn't even look too bad on this, but his handwriting samples and his teachers were concerned about it. So Mom wanted to fine-tune some of those issues going into second grade. He also had a very wacky grip. He had a quadrupod grip, and barely any palm or arch in his hand. So his fingers all were like extended. Okay, all four fingers were placed on the pencil, and his thumb was placed on the pencil. So he didn't have any stability. But he had some good motivation. He was really motivated. He was he had good behavior. So he was part of the handwriting camp. And some of the things that we did with him is we worked on placement on the line. We worked on relearning some of those letters that he had issues with. Now, essentially what I did is I focused on groups of letters. So you can see like M, B, P, and R. Those are all the diver letters. So we worked on those a lot, on where to start them. So I would, he would do like the sensory tunnel. He'd have to go through the sensory, he'd find a letter, go through the sensory tunnel, write it on the other side. The other thing that I did for his grip, because grip can or cannot make a huge difference. For this kid, I think it made a huge difference for him because it was just, he had no stability whatsoever. You know those pencils, I don't even remember what they're called. They have like the points, they have little white points, and you pull them out and you put them back into the top, and they have like 10 of them inside the pencil. I don't even remember what they're called. So those types of pencils, instead of him writing with the actual pencil where he could take out the point and put it back in, I had him write with just the points, those little white points. Not a mechanical pencil. It's the kind that they have just the little piece of lead that sticks out of the white part, and then you take it out and you put it back in the top, and there's like 10 of them. I can never remember those names. Anyway, he only would write with that, so he only wrote with that, and he also tucked something into his last 2 fingers of his hand. And that made a huge improvement with his grip. So after about 8 weeks, this was his... Thanks, Sheila. I don't know what it's called either. I use them all the time. I usually find them in the dollar section of Target or even in the dollar store. Anyway, this is the difference in his handwriting. His helping hand still was about 50%. Now he had a tripod grip. So for 6 weeks, he did, he wrote in his handwriting book 5 minutes a day with that little piece of lead from those little weird pencils. And it really made a difference in his tripod grip. Stackable pencils? Oh yeah, I think I did stackable pencils. Okay, well, you obviously know what I'm talking about, hopefully. Placement on the line, we did a bunch of stuff with that. So we'll talk about all the things we did with that. He wrote I love Kim, so the spacing between those, he chose to write that. I didn't tell him to write that, which is very nice. Papa lead pencils? Maybe that is what, I don't know. I think they're probably called all different things, and you know what I'm talking about, though, because they're really good for working on those little fine motor skills. So you can see, look at the difference after just 6 weeks. So he's able to stay on the line, a couple little things, minor things here and there, but wow, what a major difference. And did he start at the bottom? No, he started at the top. Cognitive skills were intact, so attention and behavior were intact before I started working with him, so that plays a huge role in it. But did it make a difference? Absolutely, to work on some of those sensory handwriting skills. So let's focus on what areas he had the most difficulty with. Placement on the line. All right, so one of the things we can do is give them something to write on. Okay, the thing that I like to use the most are wiki sticks. So those are those little wax strings. They stick to the paper, and kids can use their helping hand to stabilize the paper. So if you were having them write on a ruler or an index card so that they stayed on the line, they have to hold that down, right? So then in that case, they're not placing their helping hand on the paper. With the wiki stick, if it sticks to the bottom line, it doesn't move, okay? What about the letters that go under the line is usually the question. If it's such an issue that placement on the line is such an issue, the 5 letters that go below the line, I'm not going to make a huge deal about it. Great if they push it down a little bit and they go through the line, awesome. If they don't, at least the other 21 letters are on the line, right? So that's my favorite thing to do. Another strategy you can use, do you know what these are? These are tracing wheels. You would use them to make patterns, and like if you're doing like sewing and things like that. So what you would do is you would make your own raised line paper, which we'll talk about in a second, but there's a cheaper way of doing it. So you get a piece of craft foam and you put a piece of line paper on top of it backwards. Okay, upside down. So then you trace the lines with the tracing wheel. When you go to feel the other side, you'll feel a bump. Okay, now kids can write on the other side of the paper with the bumps raised. It won't have a darkened line, but if you're using paper with dark lines, then it will be very similar anyway. So you can make your own raised line paper instead of buying that very expensive paper. I love raised line paper. I think it's awesome. I think it makes a big difference, but it's very expensive. If I run out in January, by the time Special Services orders it, it's going to be the next year, So a lot of times I even use this as a fun activity for them to make their own raised line paper. And then they're more willing to do it as well. But like I said, raised line paper is pretty awesome. There's all different types of stages and thicknesses of the lines. Sometimes it's just a matter of making a darkened line, but it is very annoying to have to go in and darken all those lines if you're a teacher or an OT that's doing it. They actually have low vision writing paper for free, and you can go on printablepaper.net and find that. These are writing guides, and so what happens with these are they're like plastic things that sit on top of your paper, and then you write inside the empty slots. Okay, so you can go ahead and buy them if you want, or you can make them yourself, right? But I have used this for a lot of kids that just really have very, very poor visual processing skills, and maybe they're seeing double. They just have very, very poor awareness. That's going to be an excessive strategy. You're going to use that for a kid that really has some issues. But again, this is going to be the same issue with what about those 5 letters that go below the line. But again, if you're using something like this, I'm not going to worry about those 5 letters that go below the line. Also, both programs, Xander Blizzard and Handwriting Without Tears, talk about the difference between tall letters, low letters, and small letters. They have different terms for them. These are the terms that I use. What I do is I made these little posters, okay, and I put them in your material, so you have them for you. I have them for you, and teachers hang them up in their classroom. I also will make them smaller and tape them to their desk so they remember that these are the tall letters, these are the low letters, and these are the fist pound letters, the small letters, the ones that stay inside the lines. One of the things that really I think helps is the Handwriting Without Tears paper, the double line paper. Now, this is something that either you love it or you hate it. So you would use this for kids who mix sizes of letters. That's going to affect the size as well. Children who do not know the difference between small, tall, and low letters, and they struggle with placement on the line, you would use that for them as well. Now, when they have the triple lined paper, I think that they have a lot of issues with placing letters on the line because they just kind of fit it in somewhere between those top and bottom lines, and it makes it look kind of messy and illegible. Now, the question I always get, what if people are resistant to using this paper? Often what you hear is there's no starting line, no starting spot. It looks different and it's hard to find. So what you do here is you pick your battles, right? You encourage the paper if you like it, but don't force it. In the real world, when was the last time you wrote on triple line paper, right? You don't really use that either, okay? And there are negatives about using that kind of paper. So sometimes I recommend the triple line paper if it's a kid that actually can benefit from it. So it's not like a use this paper or else, you just kind of use what works, just like you would use different pencil grips, okay? But what happens is that many times when kids are using the triple lines, they're writing inside the top and the bottom line, but they have really poor orientation of how to place them on the line at all, so it looks like they're floating. And so then when it's time to go right on a single line, on like some of the worksheets we have out there, they continue to make the letters float. So it can be really confusing. So I do tend to teach them how to use the double line paper first, but like I said, it kind of depends on that. And I'm not going to push it if it's going to cause drama. But definitely, I have noticed it makes a difference, and some teachers have really changed how they do a lot of that stuff. The other thing that some people don't like is they don't get it. What I do is I have them take I give them a little bit of whiteout, and I have them white out little spots, and I say, this is really the dotted line, okay? It's just a different way, because all of our letters are going to be inside the dotted line and the bottom line. Some letters go above and some letters go below. And as you can see back here, there are only 7 letters that go above and only 5 letters that go below. But there's 14 of them that only stay in the middle. And including these, they also stay in the middle, but some of them go above and some of them go below. Definitely with the triple line paper, sometimes kids need like that color-coded version. Now, using this paper in black and white is very difficult. It's very confusing. I mean, kids end up writing in all the weirdest little cracks, right? But the colored version is really helpful. It's just unfortunate because you don't always have color printers and you can't buy the colored paper and that type of thing. This is just a strategy Zaner Bloser recommended. When you get the classified section of the newspaper, look at it as lines and have kids write on that as another sensory experience. Okay, so that is all for placement. That's stuff that's going to help with placement. What about size? A lot of that stuff I just talked about is going to help with size. Definitely making the paper appropriate for the size is also going to make a difference. So like we talked about at the very beginning, the strips of paper and gradually decreasing the size, using the wiki sticks to form borders for lines. So sometimes I'll give them 2 wiki sticks, one on the top, one on the bottom of top line, one on the bottom line, and then they have to write inside those. It's kind of like another version of raised line paper. Using landscape instead of portrait for worksheets will help, because if they're writing very large, writing on portrait, you might only end up getting 2 words on a line because they write so humongous, and then it looks more like a list than a sentence, right? But if it's a landscape version of the worksheet, they can at least get more words on each paper. I mean, on each line. Now, Zaner Bloser has a website that has a worksheet maker, and so does Handwriting Without Tears. So we can talk about that in a second. Here's the Zaner Bloser free section of the website, and what you can do here, it has all the different grade levels, and you can go ahead and type whatever you want and make your own handwriting worksheets. The cool part about it is that every time you change the grade level, it changes the expected size of the line space. So this is a kind of a cheating way to figure out what size they should be writing for every grade. Pretty cool, right? You can also center it, you can right center it, you can underline, you can even write in Spanish. So if you start typing, you can write in Spanish. And then they have ones that you can pay for, which are blanked out, but the very basic ones are nice. So this is a nice way to print out handwriting paper if you like this type of 3-lined colored type of paper. Handwriting Without Tears also has a version where now, one of the complaints we often get is, where are you supposed to find that double-line paper, right? Well, you can make it yourself, or you can just go to their website and print out and make your own worksheets. So like I said with Zaner Bloser, same idea. Every grade level is going to give you the spacing recommendation for that grade level. So it's kind of like you're cheating. You're figuring out how tall they should be expecting, or how tall they should be writing for each grade level. And there's going to be ones that you have to pay for, and there's going to be free ones. But you can type whatever you want them to practice. And there's all different types of templates, but those 2 websites are pretty amazing that they do that for you for free for the most part. Then you're going to do paper with boundaries. So anything that has a boundary around it will help with size. Graph paper, okay? A lot of times kids are writing on graph paper, especially for math, to keep those numbers lined up, to keep those numbers within a size, so they're not writing humongous. If you write your math problem with humongous numbers, it's going to affect how you line it up, and it's going to affect your answer. So graph paper is really awesome. This website, do2learn.com, has free graph paper on there. You would click on academics, mathematics, and then printable math grids, and you can print them out for free. You can get them in Word or in PDFs. This is stop and go paper. So basically it's like graph paper, but it doesn't have the top lines. Okay, it kind of just gives you a space to put each letter in. What about these types of worksheets? These are really fun too, that kind of help with placement on the line and size. Okay, so you can create your own worksheets doing it that way. Where you start your letters is going to, I think, plays a huge role in, memory plays a huge role in where you start your letters. So when you first learned how to make them, when you were learning back from the number one of all the components of handwriting, that's really where you learn how to start them, okay? Now, if they've created poor habits for themselves where they're starting from the bottom, you kind of pick your battles. Do you choose to change that? If they start all their letters at the bottom but it looks legible, and you're in a school system, I mean, I don't know if I would. I don't think I would really address that. I think it would be fine as long as it's legible and they're efficient. They will most likely be more efficient if they started at the top, but it's not the end of the world, right? So as long as they're legible. But if you really are addressing start, we're going to go back to those memory skills, doing those sensory types of things. Here are my questions for you. What if you had a third grader with legible handwriting, but starts all of her letters from the bottom? My answer would be that's not going to be a problem. You don't have to, nitpick those little problems because they're bothering people. If they have legible handwriting, it's going to be nearly impossible for this child to change their habit. You could try teaching them cursive if you want, but if it's legible, I wouldn't worry about it. But what if you had a second grader with a legible handwriting and they were starting all their letters from the bottom? At that point, I probably would start teaching them cursive because, again, it's going to be very difficult to change that habit. Many times the kids can change their style when they're sitting in OT sessions, but then when they go right back to the classroom, they write an answer and they revert back to their old habits. So that's kind of where we would go at that. Writing on vertical surfaces. When you put your arm up in the air, where are you starting? At the top, right? So if you are drawing on vertical surfaces or you're drawing, air writing, where you're writing in the air, your arm is already at the top. So you're going to start your letters at the top. There's a great song with Handwriting Without Tears called Where Do You Start Your Letters? Very, very catchy. You don't have to buy the CD. Unfortunately for Handwriting Without Tears, you might find it on YouTube. But it's a very, very catchy song. I really did a great job with that. And a lot of the kids, you just have to say the question, where do you start your letters? And everybody says, at the top. So that reiterates that. So not a ton I can talk about start because we already talked about memory and some of those other things. But formation, same idea. Readiness activities, playing games, doing tic-tac-toe, gross motor activities. Remember, don't use dots. Use highlighted markers. If you're going to do tracing, I really like those color changeable markers. Have you seen those? Where they draw it and then they have to trace over it with the color changeable marker and it changes color so they can really see if they're tracing on the line or not. That's a really fun activity as well. And the wet, dry, try strategies, basically the reason I like this is because they get to do it 3 times and they don't even realize it, right? So does it have to be wet, dry, try with chalk? No, you could do it with dry erase markers. You could do it with that, with the Jello. You can do it all different types of things. But basically, getting them to practice it in a variety of different ways is going to help them use that motor planning of drawing the letters. Okay, this is the last kid that we're going to talk about. And this was a student who was a second grader, and he was going into third grade. And this is his handwriting. I'm just going to show it to you, okay? Not too bad, right? I don't think it's too bad. He has good memory, not a concern. No letter reversals. Placement on the line is good. Yeah, he writes very large, definitely. Start on the line. He doesn't have any issues with that. He starts them all. Start on the line. He starts them at the top. All his letters start at the top for the most part. Formation of letters are good. Spacing is an issue with his handwriting sample. And speed. He writes extremely slow. So is this a kid we really would take on? Well, guess what? He is a kid that pretty much has a tantrum every time he's about to write. He is diagnosed with autism. He hates it. And, he's a perfectionist. So when he does it well. But it takes him a very long time, and he absolutely hates it. So he came to the handwriting camp, he was only able to come to a couple of sessions. So the plan for him was to use adapted paper to adjust size, give him some techniques for spacing, and then play a lot of games that required him to handwrite without having to think about it. So he only came for 9 sessions, and this was the difference in his handwriting. So, we gave him some compensation techniques. He had homework, but he had rewards when he came back. And then he actually asked his mom to come back for the next year so that he could learn how to write in cursive. So he loved it so much. We made it as fun as possible, and he still made progress. And, if he would have ran out of space at the beginning of the handwriting camp, he would have just said, I'm done. Now he's adding lines, he's drawing stars, he's, doing some really great things. So he was a super fun kid, but here are the things that we did with him. So spacing, what did we work on with spacing? For spacing, a lot of times kids have to understand the difference between a word versus a space. So you have to teach that. You have to teach, a lot of times if they have a cognitive issue, that if they're copying from the board, they're just bringing down the letters. They're not seeing them as words, right? So, sometimes you have to differentiate that. You can give them a 6 sentence. This is a sentence that needs to go to the doctor. And where do we have to give them their spacing medicine, right? And so they would have to tell you that. I love using things to put in between words. I usually start off with food, because food's very rewarding. So, whatever I have available, but these are fruit snacks. Okay. Sometimes I use raisins, chocolate chips, pennies. Well, you don't eat pennies, but other things that are non-edible as well. But the food idea, especially, is that when they finish the sentence, they get to swipe it and eat it. So they get a reward. Okay. Eventually, after I'm done with food, I do googly eyes, because those end up being really nice spacing sizes. And again, they swipe it, and when they swipe it, they see the spaces, and it works out really, really well. You can get these types of things, finger spaces. I gave you the prices so you can see them. The only problem I don't like about these is that you have to hold them, and then it doesn't help with your helping hand. So they're there, though. That's available. This is also another thing, fake press-on nails, and you put those on popsicle sticks so they can make it a fine motor activity first and then use them. And it's really funny because it's a finger space. Get it? I also have, when I do my kindergarten classrooms towards the end of the year, I have all the kids stand at the front holding words, and I make them their shoulders touch each other, so they're all squished together. And I say, is this very comfortable? And they say, no. I said, you need your space. So we talk about how there needs to be space between the words, and they get the idea from that, which is kind of fun. The other thing that we do is every time they see a word, they clap, and every time they see a space, they jump. So it's just an activity. Clap, jump, clap, jump, clap, jump. And then they stomp their feet for the period at the end. So that gives them a little bit more of a sensory experience. Now, like I mentioned before, those handwriting expectations, they also give you letter speeds. So how do you figure out letter speed? Number of letters written times 60 is then divided by the seconds they spent writing, and that will give you how many letters per minute. So based on the speeds in the Summit document, this is what's expected for them, how many letters per minute they should be writing. Okay? Not words per minute, letters per minute. Okay? So then you can kind of figure that. I've been adding that to my handwriting goals because I think that makes a huge difference. So this kid who was writing very, very slow was only writing like 10 letters per minute, and he was in 2nd grade. That's kind of a big deal when it's time to take state tests, right? So to work on speed, we played a lot of different games. This is probably my favorite book. It's called Games for Writing. And she's actually a special educator who just wanted kids to express themselves through writing. She doesn't care about handwriting. But she does all kinds of fun activities, so that was really exciting. And then Your therapy source has a bunch of different activities on there. These are board games that ask questions. So basically any game that asks a question that would normally be like a speech game or a verbal game, instead of speaking the answers, they have to write the answers. So this particular kid thought it was hilarious, but he had to write the answers, and he knew that. He was very motivated by it. These are also really fun games that I got off of Pinterest that are very sensory, typical games that they might enjoy playing, but they have to write them down while they're playing them. So writing hopscotch, right? Bowling. Every time they knock down a pin, they have to write down the word. Or just the ice game, or Connect Four, putting letters or words taped to the little checker things. Really, every time they put one in, they have to write the letter. Also, these two books are really I highly recommend them. They're not very expensive. They're great for the OT because we work with a variety of ages, and they go from K through 5. And this one on the bottom is really for pre-K and kindergarten. They really work on those readiness skills, copying from the board, because now that particular kid, for example, had an issue with copying from the board. He hated copying from the board. He wouldn't do it. But when we started doing the activities from this book, we did them. It's progressive, so they start off very easy, and then they progressively get harder, but in a fun way. Another speed game, or another speed technique would be used, cal aerobics. Basically, this program has you write repetitive, simple writing patterns to music, but basically using music to add rhythm really helps increase the fluidity of handwriting. So we talked about cursive a little bit already. This is a kid that I worked with that was a 3rd grader, he was a 4th grader, and actually his handwriting doesn't even look, his printing doesn't even look too bad, but it typically would be in the classroom compared to an OT. But this is how many seconds it took him to write a cursive sentence and how many seconds it took him to write a print sentence, right? It's a difference, but it's not a humongous difference. And I think that the cursive is more legible than the print, and it was consistently more legible. That was the difference. In this sample, you can't really see it too much, but overall, it was a good solution for him to be a cursive handwriter. This was another kid in the group. This was a kid that wrote, he was a 4th grader, 26 seconds to write this. But in cursive, he wrote it in 46 seconds, 73 for cursive and 15. This was not a good solution for him. This we did for only like a month or 2. This was not a good strategy for him. He he wasn't 2 months. We did it with both kids for 6 months, and I ended up stopping it with this kid. But the other kid continued to write in cursive, and he actually preferred to write in cursive. So it was added to his IEP. There's different styles. If you're going to teach cursive, I definitely would go with handwriting without tears, just because it's more simple. Yes, it looks a little different for us who are used to it, but it's so much easier for them to read. Okay, so you can see the differences here with the cursive styles. So I have all the references here for you, and hopefully you enjoyed it. And you will get a follow-up email 1 hour after this webinar. You'll take the post-test. You have to pass it with a score of 70 or higher, and then you'll receive a certificate. And then you can print and save your certificate for CEU purposes. There was one question that I saw, and it says, are your teachers' parents receptive to a student using the cursive over printing? Yes and no. I would say 75% of my teachers are receptive to doing it when they see that it's easier for them and more legible for them to do than printing. I think the same thing would happen with typing. They would be more accepting of students typing, because even typing can be, not all of my classrooms have computers in their classroom. So, that's going to be more difficult for them to have them type answers. And they don't always understand how to get the worksheets on the computer and that type of thing. But I usually teach them how to do that, and then once I teach them, they're pretty willing to do it. I have some amazing teachers at my school would like to know if there are any books on handwriting that would be helpful for them to read. Do you have any good suggestions? So do you mean books on handwriting or like actual workbooks? Well, while you're answering that, books that talk about handwriting and how to best teach it, well, I would go to that website, the HW21 Summit, and honestly, they wouldn't even need to read books. They could just watch the videos on there. It's pretty interesting, actually. So go to that website. That they have some really good information on there, and then it's called HW21Summit.com. HW21Summit.com. And that has a lot of really good information because it's all the most recent research on it, and it does tell you why it's so good to teach handwriting and that type of stuff. And then honestly, I would go to the Handwriting Without Tears websites. I don't really know of like books, like literature books that would do that, but a lot of them are more workbooks. Unless someone else has an idea. Okay, and then we have, if you had to choose a handwriting assessment versus a screener, which one would you recommend? Personally, it depends what I'm looking at. If I was doing it for my handwriting camp, because that's the only thing we're working on, we're not working on all the delayed areas, it would be the handwriting assessment. If I was doing it as part of my OT evaluation in a school system, I would use the screener. It is so easy to use, and it totals it up for you, and it gives you percentages, and I might not put the percentages in the report, but I'll have them for myself if I recommend, and it just makes life so much easier. And don't forget, handwriting should not be a huge part of your OT evaluation. It should be about the other components, visual perception, motor planning, fine motor skills, and that's what the report should be about, and how it affects them might be their handwriting, so there should be a small section about that, but that's why I've chosen not to do those assessments, and honestly, they take a ton of time to score, and they give you information that's helpful to you, but may confuse teachers and parents. Okay, Gwen did post the post test. So copy and paste this link and enter the password NEAT. So it's right there on there. And I'm just making sure I answered all the questions. Okay. How old or grade level do you continue to work on printing before going to typing? Yeah, I think it was one of the first slides, I kind of put a game plan out there. I would say 3rd grade is the youngest. And 3rd grade would be the youngest. Well, I can't say that for everyone because this past year I had a kid with severe dyspraxia, and I had him start doing the handwriting without tears, the keyboarding without tears in 1st grade. But that was kind of an exception in a kind of difficult situation. But most kids, I would start them in 3rd grade. Yeah, because in New York especially, 3rd grade is when they start doing their state testing. And so end of 2nd grade and beginning of 3rd is when I would get them ready for typing so that I could possibly make it as a testing modification for them to type their answers. Because I can't add scribe on for everyone. I mean, a lot of these kids don't have physical disabilities that they need a scribe, but they will accept typing. And if you do want to ask me questions about my handwriting camp, you can definitely email me about that. I haven't done it since I had the twins. For the last 2 years, I haven't done it in the summer, but I definitely can help you about that. And they also, Handwriting Without Tears actually has a webinar on summer handwriting camps. I'm glad you enjoyed the webinar, and if you don't have any other questions, feel free to go ahead and take your post test, and look out for our other webinars through sensationalbrain.com that are coming up, and I will definitely stay in touch. And if you would like to join my Google group, definitely email me about that and I will add you on. Oops. Thanks. Have a great night.